How's it going, guys? I am here with the mightiest of Maxes. Of course, he's actually best known for recently coaching a team at EpicLAN or Epic WAN to an incredible, I think it was a top 24 placing. So tell us from the start, Max, this incredible run you had at this tournament. What was it like coaching? How did you feel? How did it end? Just give us the lowdown.
We went in with fairly high expectations and it ended in pretty much disaster. It was the end of my coaching career pretty much instantly. It was a bit of fun there, so there's not too much to read into.
Okay, so obviously he's actually the in-game leader of Endpoint, if you didn't know. Didn't just, coach EpicLAN or Epic WAN or whatever it is these days. So I thought the place we should start really is just sort of like setting the stage for Endpoint as a team. So from my knowledge, domestically, just battering everyone basically, and even if you're forced to use a stand-in because to meet the majority player rules and stuff, and majority UK players. Then in some other tournaments, play a lot of kind of the MDL level tournaments, Snow Sweet Snow at the moment. I think Pinnacle Cup you got coming up as well. So playing a lot of these tournaments. But when it came to kind of the top level competition, so I think it was DreamHack Fall at the end of last year, and I think you played in the Blast Showdown. And these tournaments, not the best placings. So overall, just tell me kind of what is Endpoint kind of aiming for at the moment? Where do you see yourself as a team? What are you kind of growing towards, particularly in this year, I guess, of 2021?
I think last year we had three basic goals. It was obviously make MDL, and then we ended up making Pro League. So I think the only goal we had this year was just to sort of maintain that. I don't really know how it works with Pro League. I don't know how you get relegated or how you stay up, but obviously the goal is to stay in Pro League, and just like build on our foundation as a team and try and build on the consistency as well, which is a big issue of our team. I feel like we're not consistent enough to be a top tier team yet. So I mean that's kind of the goal right now.
What would you say your kind of biggest flaw in terms of consistency is? Is there a particular area that you've looked at in your game, or maybe it's communication, maybe it's inside the game, maybe it's outside? Is there a particular type of team even that you play against and you just seem to lose against even though they're ranked below you? Where would you say this inconsistency is coming from?
Well, we've had discussions as a team and we've kind of boiled it down a little bit to sort of how we play. I think CS is very stylistic and you can play well against certain styles of teams, and obviously they might beat other teams that you might lose against just based on their style. So I think it's something stylistically that we have to look at, which is kind of like my job, I guess, as the IGL. And I'm relatively fresh in that department. Like I'm not experienced as you might see in like the Pro League teams or whatever. And as well, it's just building our confidence on maps against higher tier opposition, I think, is the key.
Okay, so from my perspective, from like the outside as an analyst, when I look at teams, when I watch teams play, I think a lot of the community doesn't really realize the difference between, say, a 40th ranked team and maybe a 10th ranked team. Even if they watch the top tournaments and they say this 10th ranked team isn't playing brilliantly, in my eyes, like the disparity is enormous between those teams, where like you just see the differences in the team play and the communication and like the depth of strategy particularly is something you just don't see at the lower levels of play. So from your perspective, you've obviously played like the whole field at this point, from kind of 60th best maybe to even top 5 teams. So in your eyes, what really is the differences? How big are the differences between these teams? Can you really kind of feel it in the server when you're playing?
Yeah, like from what we've experienced and from what I've experienced in practice or even in officials, there's a fairly big gap, I'd say, between tier 1, tier 2 and sort of the tier 3, tier 4 teams. It's just, it boils down to protocols. And what I mean by that is there's some things that you can read or like you can anti-strat tier 3, tier 4 teams with, and they'll do it like consistently, whereas tier 1, tier 2 will mask it and they'll have different protocols for different things, and it's hard to read into. And that's probably the fundamental difference, I'd say. It's not really the skill, because I think you have a lot of skilled players across the board, but it's just how they react to situations and how they set themselves up, I guess, and how they exploit your weaknesses as well.
Yeah, so something obviously a lot, particularly in lower level teams, is say they're playing Mirage T side, they'll use like the same mid take every round or something, or they'll have only 2 variations, and as the CT side, you can just quickly adapt to it. Whereas a top level team, they all, in kind of like how they build the game, they build it from the first place of saying, we're always going to throw these two smokes every single round, no matter what we're doing. We're always going to throw these flashes. We're always going to make it really kind of uncomfortable for like the CT side to play against. So from your perspective as an in-game leader, has it been really tricky actually to kind of deal with this sort of thing, deal with teams really doing a good job of masking how they play, or, you know, being smart about what utility they actually put down to make rounds look the same when they're actually doing stuff really different? Is this an area that you've had to think a lot about recently against particularly top level teams?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's for me, it's kind of a map dependency, because it depends kind of where I'm playing on maps if I can read what they're doing. But if I can't do it, then it can't, like the job falls on someone else in the team who's like is in a position to do it. But there's definitely a disparity, I think, and we've noticed it. I think before we like vanished out of the team, and they we're like, oh, they're doing this, and it's like, oh, they're not doing it, they're doing something else.
Yeah.
And it's just like you just get caught off guard by it. So yeah, that's the one thing we kind of learned, was it's hard to anti-strat a tier 1, tier 2 opponent, really.
Yeah. From what I've seen, it's more a case of you just got to kind of build up a really good understanding for what something looks like, or get a really good feel for, well, particularly across a team, you probably need all of your players to have a really good feel for what's coming in. And then obviously the communication is a massive part of this for players, not just to say exactly what they're seeing, but maybe go a bit beyond that and say, I think they're doing this. Maybe they got, you know, this number of players here. Maybe we should play into this area. So in terms of the whole team as a unit rather than just yourself, is this kind of something you've had to think a lot about, something you had to work on, maybe the comms of how you kind of describe quickly what a team is doing round to round and try and actually make adjustments?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, like I was saying before, it kind of depends whether I can read it or not. And if I can't tell for sure what's going on, then it's like more individual approaches. So it'll be like, oh, well, I think they're doing this, and then we'll adjust what we're doing based on that, or we'll try to essentially to try and disrupt at least a variant of what they're trying to do. Like an example is on Dust 2, for example, they try and go mid B, but then they might fake it and go up short. So we'll try and, when it might push long doors, or we might try and fight for catwalk, or we'll try and shut down their mid by, you know, smoking mid doors mid round or something. So it's like we try to, instead of trying to anti-strat specific things, now we try to look for like how we can shut down multiple things if we think they're going to do one of their strats or something like that, for example.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of on this sort of topic, there's what I see a lot is when lower tier teams just play lower tier teams, or they play in the same sort of tournaments, it's really hard for them to improve actually. And I can imagine you can talk a bit to this probably. When you just play the same sort of caliber of teams, you don't get good exposure to the top level teams. Just like you don't really know if what you're using is really going to work on a top level. You don't know if it's just, you know, mechanically outplaying somebody rather than a really high kind of strategic level. So for you, when you have been playing some of these top teams, how much has the exposure to those teams even changed how you think about CS in general, to be honest? How much has it helped your kind of team overall see what's working, what doesn't work, maybe need to look at different aspects? So exposure to these top teams so far, how has it changed your approach to the game?
It all kind of started last year when obviously the COVID pandemic struck and everything moved online. We ended up in a position where we were just playing home sweet homes every week. And so, you know, we would fare fairly well against the people at our level, and we'd always make to the playoffs. And then we get to the playoffs and we're playing against like Complexity, or we're playing against Heroic or North or someone that's above our level, and we'd always get battered. And it was obviously quite frustrating, but we learned a lot in the sense that when you're beating the teams at your level, you kind of get a bit confident and you realize, oh, wait, there's people better than us still. And then like you can just look back at your games and tweak the smallest things, but it makes you so much better. And that's the nicest part about it. I think we were quite strong at that at the start of the year, and even now, like we'll play against teams like Gambit and Virtus Pro, and you know we'll get battered, and then we're like, okay, well there must be something we're doing wrong, and then we'll look back and it's like, okay, we're doing this one, or they play like this, we should try and, you know, copy that style a little bit. So I think there's a lot of benefits to playing a lot of games, and obviously losing games as well. There's a lot of benefits too.
Yeah. Well, they always say losing is learning, and I mean, for example, Flashpoint Season 2. A team that this topic came up a lot with actually was Forza, because Forza was a team that they just creeped in through the qualifying. Being realistic, they probably were one of the bottom teams in the tournament. But from my perspective, just for them having exposure to the top teams was so valuable for some of those players, and especially Jerry Cooling, when, you know, even if as you say, you might get battered in some of these games, I can imagine just seeing how your opposing in-game leader chooses to make decisions against what you're playing. And then obviously you've played the game yourself. You can see your whole perspective. You have a really good kind of... You can, like, it's so much easier to pull things out of that demo, isn't it? Rather than just watching a random pro game, because you know exactly where these decisions came from. So have you actually spent a lot of time poring over these games that you've lost, even though they might be a bit painful to watch back? Yeah. Is this something that you do a lot of out of the server?
No, yeah, we do
these games?
Yeah, we do it all the time. It's just trying to find the time between obviously playing the official, winning or losing, and then trying to fit that review between practice or the next official. So that's the only hard part for us. But yeah, like every opportunity we get, we'll try and watch it back, see if there's anything we've been doing wrong, or, you know, it's easy to point out I've called a strat and we've done the strat wrong. But it's like, in our defaults, is there anything that gives away too much information, or is there something we're doing a bit too half-assed, or is it we're just playing fundamentally wrong? It's just small things like that. And I think as well, we always try and spend at least some time during the week watching how other teams play. It's not always watching our demos back, but we'll watch, like, we love watching Gambit demos and like CIS demos, like VP and stuff, and Navi, and you learn so much. And it's just, I don't know, it's quite nice to watch.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, because from what I've seen of VP and Gambit, particularly at Katowice, even if they're not like the most solid teams, the amount of like ideas they bring to the server, the amount of like tiny little setups they bring out, or different kind of ways of playing bomb sites I've never seen before. That it's definitely true if you know how to use those kind of games in the right way. Because this is a topic, when I've coached at lower levels, I've seen a lot where players just watch demos and stuff, and they don't really know how to take things out of them, or they take something not under. Like, you have to really understand why they're calling these things or using them in the right situations. So maybe not necessarily for you, but for some of your players, has this been a problem when you're watching back these pro demos? They're saying, oh yeah, let's just use this setup, but maybe they're not thinking exactly about why they're calling this, or they've got a particular read in mind. Is this a challenge for you to get them to see these demos in the right way?
Not really in this lineup, but in other teams where it's been like a lower level, it's definitely been a thing, because it is hard if you don't know what to look for to know what to look for. You know, you're watching like, oh, he throws this smoke, I'm just gonna do this and throw the smoke. But it's like, well, why is he throwing the smoke? You know, what are his teammates doing? Or they've done this strat, but what's the bigger picture looking like? Stuff like that. And it's just, I think the higher level you go in CS, the more you appreciate watching high level teams play. And it might be the smallest thing you see in a demo, but, you know, like, I think I love watching it, and I like spotting these little things and realizing, okay, that was actually kind of cool, but no one else really spots it. So
yeah. Well, I try to spot them myself most of the time. Yeah, it is like, it's probably the most fun aspect of the game for me, actually, is trying to like reverse engineer like decision making processes of the top pros. Because something that a lot of people don't so a lot of people don't think about, that like every single decision by a top team is very crafted decision. There's a very particular reason they're calling this. There's a lot of kind of communication, or, you know, they've seen the other team play this way for 3 rounds and they think, yeah, this is a round we're going to run. And when you like really watch a game back, or analyze a game, or even coaching a game or whatever, like when you actually see these things come together, that's kind of my favorite aspect of the game, to be honest, rather than just the frags or whatever that everyone else watches. So I think this is a good segue into kind of another topic. Actually, no, I've got another one first. A potential problem that you get from teams at your level, or particularly a bit below, to be honest, is that when you're playing in the MDL games, or even advanced, top-end advanced, for example, there's a lot of potential to get confirmation bias on players and even the in-game leader in terms of calling. So have you found this has been a bit of a problem as you go up through the levels? Is you have a very fixed way of maybe how you want to call a game, where you think this is the right way to call this situation, and you get up to a high level, you get beaten by a better team, and then you have to rethink it all again, and you might have realized that I tricked myself here thinking this was like a really sick call, but really, you know, he's got to be in the right situation at the right time. So confirmation bias, tell me how it's played out for yourself and Endpoint in general.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started IGLing, that was definitely the case. I'd see it as like a binary option. Okay, this happens, therefore we should do this reaction. But the better teams you play and the more experience you get, you realize that's actually not the case at all in CS. Like, especially, yeah, like for example, if you go for our MDL season, like we would have obviously the team just formed and we went straight into MDLs. And it's like, okay, well, we have to get a playbook up. And you spend 3 months, 6 months getting a playbook. And then you kind of depend on it a bit too much. And then you play against a tier 1 team and you get absolutely slapped. You're like, okay, well, this worked against this team at this level, it didn't work here. And then you watch the game, you're like, okay, well, it didn't work because they're taking advantage of this in your default, or you're doing a strat where they're not really abusing the flash timings. Whereas a tier 1 team, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Like, or you might lose an AWP to an eco or something, and they get the AWP and you get absolutely decimated, stuff like that. It's like obviously the higher skilled players in tier 1 take advantage of this, and it's easy to overlook when you're playing like at your level or below your level.
Have any of your players you've led in particular had big problems that, I mean, you don't have to say exactly who they were, but like, have you had issues where maybe you or the coach in particular has to speak to players when they're playing like high level teams and say this like style you're playing here doesn't work, or you shouldn't be making this play in this situation, even though at lower levels you might just frag out against these players. We got to like make the really high like percentage choices here. Is this a potential issue you've had with some players, or something you've had to work on with some people?
I wouldn't say so in this lineup, but I think if we ever encounter an issue where it's like we watch a game back, it's like, okay, we've done this wrong, or like, why have we done this? We kind of discuss it as a team, and we're like, well, is that the best option? What options do we have available to us? Is it the percentage? Are we playing a percentage chance of winning the round, or are we playing kind of like YOLO? They're a worse team than us. We're just kind of giving it a bit too much for no reason. And it's always like more of a discussion in our team rather than it being like me or the coach saying like, what are you doing? Like, you shouldn't be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that. And it's like, I think that helps build play styles and it helps build chemistry with the players as well. So yeah, we don't particularly say you can't do this or whatever. It's more of like, are we optimizing the way we play? Is it the most efficient way of playing? Stuff like that.
Do you like to do a lot of stuff where you get everyone together outside of the server to watch games back, and you talk as a team just generally about decision making, or generally about how you approach the situation? Do you prefer to do it kind of that way versus, I don't know, speaking to players one-on-one, for example?
Yeah, I think every time we watch, especially our games back, we watch it as a group. But if we're doing more like individualistic stuff where it's like, we're trying to do a map and we're struggling with certain things, obviously like we'll watch things individually or as pairs or as like a bomb site or stuff like that. So it kind of depends on the situation, but in terms of watching our own stuff back, we always do it as a group, because then we can pause the demo and discuss okay, what went wrong, or if we have it recorded with the team comms, we can listen to it back with the team comms as well and be like, hey, well, you called this, we didn't really do that, we did this instead, that's the issue and stuff like that. So there's no real question as like what happened, or I said something that didn't get heard if you hear it on the team comm or whatever. So
I mean, to be honest, this approach sounds quite different to a lot of other UK teams, particularly lower level ones, where they don't like the power of this side of the game, of doing stuff outside the server and just all being like, something I say all the time is like, in CS, just being on the same page and doing something proactive together is more important than anything else. So yeah, is this something you've seen in other teams where maybe they're not doing this sort of thing as much, or maybe it's just someone just messaging someone on Steam saying don't push that smoke or something? Yeah,
definitely in like less professional teams. Yeah, I've been a part of it before. Like, it's just like, I guess it gets to a point where you're getting paid to play and you're at such a high level that like that sort of stuff is just a bit too amateur, and it's way more efficient just to get the job done and just watch the demo back at however grueling it is if you lost a game, or however nice it is if you won a game, really.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about it a bit already, but let's talk kind of about your development as an in-game leader, because you weren't always an in-game leader. It was your choice to transition into this role. So I think the biggest question I have is, for you, we've talked about this a bit already, but is it mainly trial and error in terms of trying to improve your calling? Is it having advice from fellow players or coaches? Like, how do you try to improve yourself as an in-game leader? What are the sort of tools you use to try and push yourself forward in terms of your kind of decision making as a caller?
When I first started, like I said before, like it was a lot of binary thinking. It was like, okay, well, if this happens, I'm going to call this, and then as much as I wanted it to be that way, that's not really how CS is. There's so many dynamic options available to you, and there's so many different things can happen that it's not really a viable way to call. So then it became more like, okay, well, how are other teams playing? And I'd watch a few games, and I'd literally just watch POVs of the IGL to try and figure out when the calls are being made, and if so, like
Yeah.
kind of what info they've got from their perspective, and kind of built that into sort of my understanding of the game. And then other than that, it was kind of like talking to other people who either were IGLs or coaches and seeing like how their teams kind of operate. And then from there, it's trial and error. It's like just calling things. If you're getting it wrong, like what's going wrong, watching the game back, like calling something and realizing, okay, well, we had the info for something. Why didn't we do this? And I think that's probably the best way to learn how to call, other than being taught from obviously an IGL, which I didn't get the opportunity to do really. But that's kind of how my experience has been so far.
So from what you're describing, it sounds like you've sort of started off where it's more like a decision making tree where you just sort of you start off the round, if this happens you do this, and then you just call in this, you call it out, it's the end of the branch, and then you beep pop or something at the end of the round. But would you say now you're starting to move more towards calling by feel, even though that field's obviously educated by a lot of playing and a lot of communication? Are you saying do you feel like you're a bit more on the fly now, a bit more like adapting mid round, for example, a bit more instead of having something set, you'll be able to kind of coordinate something fast as your team? Would you say you're moving more towards a bit more kind of free flowing rather than being totally set in terms of
Yeah,
how
I
you
mean
call?
the way that I like to do it is kind of start up the early round, and then depending on if we're playing CT or T, but it like who's got the info, what are we going to do? And it's like if I can call the start of the round, then generally we can get into a position where at least I'm getting feedback on the information, and I can make a call from there rather than trying to call the end game from the start of the round. I think that's what like high tier CS is really. You can't really call the end round from freeze time. It's not viable
Yeah.
in like in most situations anyway. It's not really viable, but it's my opinion.
So with this is a big part being working on communication then in terms of getting because if you're going to call like this where you don't call around from spawn, a big part of that obviously is kind of reading where the other team is or what utility they have left, because if you're going to call mid round, you need to be really on point with knowing kind of with the right call to go into at that time. So has that been a big part of within you as a caller and your teams in general, trying to get the communication a bit better, telling players, you need to be telling me this so I can make the right call? Has that been a bit of a learning curve in terms of changing your style of calling?
Yeah, because we are into this wall where there's only so much I think the IGO can see on a map, and it's like, well, not the all seeing eye. I can't see, I can't hear everything. I can't see everything. So it's like you have to give the information if you're like doing default rounds or if you're playing a certain way, so that I can try to make the right call. But yeah, like the easiest way to fix that is by watching the games back and just seeing and listening to the comms and saying, well, like, I didn't get this information, or I've called something, it got overcalled by someone, because of this, and it turns out to be the right thing because they've obviously got the information. So yeah, it's definitely a learning curve, but it's something that it's just part of IGL, and I think you have to just get on with it.
So are you a caller that likes to give your players a lot of space in terms of doing some of the mid rounding? So for example, let's say you're just like defaulting on T side Inferno, will you let whoever's doing the other side of the map, so whether you say your apps, let the banana guys call that all themselves, how they want to take it at the start, and whether they want to, I don't know, pressure B or something? Do you like to give your players a lot of space to kind of mid round themselves when it doesn't clash with your overall call?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that's how I've started off, and it's something I've kind of retained as well on some maps. But I think there's some maps in the pool where it's not really viable to do that, or there's better ways to do it. So we try to stray away from it a bit. But I think a great example is Inferno. Like I can dictate banana control or mid control, one of the two, and then it's kind of whoever's on the other side has to do their own little thing because I can't do both at the same time. Um, Whereas on other maps, it's a different play style. I'd say like Vertigo, for example, you don't really have
They
that.
just go A, go ramp.
Yeah, it's like you have the A control, and then I see it as like B and mid being their own little two islands. They can do what they want, kind of.
Yeah. So this is like a good segue into another question, which is all about players taking initiative. So this is definitely an area where when I've watched lower tier teams play, some teams do, but it tends to be the ones that are more puggy, to be honest, the ones that have their players taking a lot of space, taking a lot of initiative. And then you have the other group, which is just super set. They just run set rounds all day long and just get by with running, whatever, playing nuke T side and just running 5 set rounds for the whole half. So for you, do you like your players taking a lot of initiative? Do you think it's a really good idea to get them kind of being more vocal, being like, if they see a gap, just exploit it, you go for it? Are you someone that like pushes this kind of side of the game a bit on them? Do you want them to be taking a lot of individual initiative and making their own decisions?
I think, I used to not like it, but I feel like the better players you have on your team and the more understanding they have of the situation is the better environment you have, the higher level of CS you can play. I think it's such a good way to play CS at a high level because, we were watching a lot of Gambit demos and VP demos recently, and the plays that they make as a team and individually is incredible. Like, they just have full confidence and full faith in their teammates. So it's like, if they try and open up one side of the map, it doesn't work. Then the other two guys are just flying out somewhere and just, taking the space and using their initiative and doing what they think's best. So I think it is a very risky way of playing, but you have to kind of practice it, and know that the individual players know their limits and they know what they can and can't do, and sort of like what situation they can do something
Yeah.
in. I think it's I like the idea of playing that way, but it can be pretty tricky. But I'd say it's probably one of the best ways of playing CS.
Yeah. So in terms of this topic, it's the sort of thing I've seen played out a lot of times where if you have a lower level team and they try to let their players take more initiative, the players, when they're given too much space, they might make a lot of mistakes and give up rounds, or get too aggressive in a man advantage, for example, because there isn't a set rule in place. So teams lock themselves into thinking, the in-game leader's got to call everything. They've got to, micro the players. It's got to be all set rounds just so we don't make these mistakes. But when you get to the top level, and particularly, I'm certain for example, that like in the last couple of years, all of the top teams have come around to, giving players almost full autonomy to go as long as it doesn't clash too much with the in-game leader's call. If they see a window, if they see an opening, if they think they can make a play around like a bad CT smoke or something, they're just going to go for it and try and exploit that gap. So I guess the question is do you see this in other teams? Do you play some teams and they're just playing super set and standard, and maybe you think maybe they should be letting their players have more space? Or on the converse, have you seen some teams where they're playing super loose, giving players all the space when maybe they should be tightening up a bit? It's obviously a balance, but how do you see this in the rest of the scene? How do you see this in other teams you're playing against, this kind of whole concept of taking initiative versus knowing their bounds and not getting too overzealous, I guess?
Yeah, I think the better teams we play generally, the more free, like the more you notice it. For example, I think we played. It might have been the Flashpoint 2 qualifier. We played VP, and then I knew from that game that they were winning Flashpoint. It was mental. It was like, I think we played a best of 3, and we got absolutely demolished. It wasn't even close. And then the way that they were playing their CT sides was mental. It was every time you try and do something, there's a guy behind you or there's a guy in your face trying to disrupt what you're doing. And it's such individual freedom. I don't think it was pre-planned, or the IGL was saying, okay, well, you can do this.
There's no way they could call it fast enough.
Yeah, it's not possible. And I think that's when I first realized that VP are back and they're incredible. And then I was like, okay, well, the other team's Gambit, and we used to play Gambit all the time. And I started watching their games, and I realized that they've got such a unique system. I don't think many teams do what they do, but they have such faith in it that it's always like 3 men together trying to do something, and there's 2 people on the other side of the map just doing their own little thing. And if something happens, they kind of know what they can do and what not to do, and it always works out for them every single time. So I'm not surprised that they managed to win Calabresa the other day.
What maps did you play Virtus Pro on in that? Do you remember in that series?
Yeah, of course. We played, I don't know what order it was. We played Train and Inferno.
Okay,
and
yeah.
It was the same story on both maps. It was on Train, you're trying to do a default, they're pushing B behind you, or they're pushing Ali behind you, or he's pushing through T mid behind you. And on Inferno, it was the same thing. The guy's pushing down Banana behind you. You're about to exec on A. He's bottom mid shooting you in the back, or you're going from mid back to B. He's pushed through apps. He's shot you in the back. It was mental.
Yeah, I can imagine your Kindar CT side Inferno. It's just
yeah,
he pushes the deep banana smoke more than anyone in the world. I'm absolutely certain. Yeah, actually, from my perspective, from watching Virtus Pro, the way I like to describe them is I think they're a team the way I describe it is they over rotate. Whereas as soon as they get information on the other side of the map, the players all just swarm towards it. And for example, like when they're playing Dust 2, the speed that Sanji flanks long is just ridiculous. And I've seen him caught out quite a few times. I think sometimes they definitely, I've seen your Kindle push Banana and just get fragged so many times. Yeah, but I guess this is a good way to transition into your Pro League group, because actually Virtus Pro is in that group, I believe. And I saw this group, and I won't lie, I was crying for you a bit when I saw this group because it's just like, can you even catch a break with some of these teams? So your group is Astralis, Liquid, Virtus Pro, Fnatic, and then VP. Sorry, not VP, EG. And EG, they don't have a fifth at the moment, so I don't know what they're going to be doing there. But I guess for you guys, the only target here is kind of, I don't want to say it in a bad way, but like do your best. Just give it give this your best shot. Try and play your best CS. See what works. See what doesn't work. If you can scrape through these group stages, that would be an incredible achievement. So, just from your perspective, what is the goal here? What are we aiming for with this Pro League group that you'll be playing in a couple of weeks?
Obviously, the ultimate goal is to make it through the group, but it's just trying to be realistic. Obviously, I think it's by far the stacked group out of them all. So obviously it's not going to be easy by any stretch, but I think we're quietly confident that we can upset a few of these teams for sure. I think it helps that we've played, for example, Virtus Pro, we played them so many times now that we kind of have a feel of how they play. And we've practiced a few of these teams, not really the American ones, but we've practiced the European ones a couple of times as well, so we have a feel for how they play. So hopefully that will give us a bit of confidence going into it.
So talk me through some of these teams. Just tell me, I don't know, what rough style you expect them to employ. I mean, we talked a bit about Virtus Pro already, so presumably playing a Virtus Pro, you're expecting a very proactive game of, comms have got to be on point if you're playing Virtus Pro. If they're just going to be pushing all over the place, got to be very conscious of what areas of the map are open, people communicating that B's open so you don't just get flanked. So Virtus Pro in that matchup, is that one where presumably you've actually thought a bit about how you'd call against them again if you played them? What sort of rounds you'd be running if you played a Virtus Pro?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the first time we played them, I think was the Flashpoint qualifier, and it obviously took us by surprise how they played. But it's like it can be very on and off how they play. I think very aggressive or very passive, depending on how they're feeling, I guess, and what the map is. So I think we kind of have a game plan going into there. But in terms of another team, for example, obviously Astralis is kind of the opposite of Virtus Pro. Like they're quite methodical. You won't really see them doing these rash individual. Well, I mean, maybe they do, but it's not to the extent I wouldn't say as Virtus Pro. So you can kind of read them a bit more in terms of them being quite methodical, quite slow. They try and play quote unquote proper CS, which I think. I guess EG would be similar to Astralis in that sense, but obviously they've got a roster change.
I have no idea what EG is going to play like. They might go super loose. You never know.
It's always hard playing CS. Essentially, it's going to be a new player, right? So it's pretty much a stand-in. It's always hard to play with a stand-in. So I imagine it's either one or the other. It's either going to be copying what they've already got in their playbook or trying to, just play with individuals quite loose, like you said, which again it is really hard to do as well if you've got a new player. Liquid, I think similar. I don't know about Liquid. I haven't really watched them that much since they've kind of Fallen in with the he's IGL now, isn't he? So
yes, From what I've seen, they play pretty standard. I mean, it's not surprising considering a recent roster move and change of in-game leader. So, to be honest, I wouldn't say they're that different to Astralis in terms of how I think they'd play. So I think you will see a pretty standard game from Liquid when you play them.
Yeah. we haven't really had much chance playing. Like, in any tournament we play, I don't think we've ever played a North American team. I think the last time we got the chance it was Blast, and then it would have been EG actually, and then they pulled out, and we had to play against Heroic. So I don't think we've ever played a North American team, and I think Fnatic. I think they play a lot differently than they used to. I think we practiced them a couple of times now. It's nothing that we're really surprised by, but I'd say it's more comparable to sort of Astralis and Liquid rather than Virtus Pro sort of hyper aggression. It's more sort of methodical CS again.
Yeah.
Which I think we play quite well against this style, where it's kind of slow and you have a chance to do something rather than them flying in your face and killing you from behind or whatever. So I think there's a couple of different play styles that we are up against, but I think ultimately we're probably prepared for it.
Yeah, Fnatic's a good one because they're definitely, I think they've got a really strange rep of still being like Pronax Fnatic when that was so many years ago. In this team now, as you say, they do play really solid CS. They do make a lot of smart decisions. They tend to play super default on T-side, like ridiculously default, especially, well, at least with the old lineup. I haven't watched the new one with Jack so much, but yes, I'd expect a pretty standard game from them as well. But would you say that you find it a lot easier to call against these teams that play a bit slower? Have you found that? We talked a bit about VP here, maybe a Gambit as well. The ones they're getting really aggressive, putting maybe the comms under a lot of the pressure. Are these much harder for you to call against some of these teams?
I think historically we've always been better against the sort of the slower methodical teams. Even when we went to DreamHack Anaheim last year, even though it was a really early stage in our team, we were able to compete against Forza, who are like probably one of the favorites to win the event. And then we played against Furia, and obviously it's just a hyper aggressive style, and you just get absolutely slaughtered. So it's even I think we played against Heroic and Blast. Again, they had more of a methodical style. It's kind of slow. We fared fairly well. We had to play them after a best of 5, so it wasn't the greatest situation for us. But I think we could have beaten them on another day. But it was a really close series. I think we have a lot more confidence against slower styles of play. But it's just trying to match the tempo, I guess, in the other styles, the aggressive styles, and it's not getting caught off by little individual plays that are going to happen.
In terms of some of these matchups, and maybe you can speak to some of the games in the past you've played against Heroic, for example, have you ever come into these matches thinking, we should throw a curveball here, we should potentially call rounds that are a bit more risky, we should, maybe 4-1 more and try and just pop onto a site and try and, at least get some entries, get ourselves into rounds? Have you ever looked at it from the perspective of maybe if we play super slow and standard ourselves and try and, fight fire with fire, it's not going to work? Do you ever come into these games thinking, maybe we should try something a bit more left field, a bit more like a Virtus Pro or Gambit, for example, and try and catch these teams off guard?
Yeah, there's definitely been times where we've made a game plan for a game. It's kind of, maybe it is going to plan, maybe it's not going to plan. And then as the IGL, sometimes I get the feeling that, a switch of pace is good, whether it's going from fast to slow or slow to fast, just to vary it up. And sometimes it does catch these teams out. I think it will catch any team out, really, when you condition them to play a certain way and then, you switch it up. It's kind of hard to deal with. But sometimes in the game plan, sometimes it's just kind of something that I'll call or someone else will call just to vary things up.
Yeah, so in terms of the format for Pro League, I think you're in Group D, so you've got a few weeks, I guess. But the format is round robin, best of 3. So you get to play all of these teams in best of 3 series. So, and actually for me, in terms of a team like you guys, I think this is actually a perfect format where it's not just like you show up, you're playing like a single limb bracket, and that's one game, you're out. This format for me feels like a really great thing for you guys, where you can come into 5 series, you've got time to prep, you know who you're playing. You can, think about the veto. We're going to pick into this map. We're going to try this out. We're going to come in with this game plan and try and, catch them off guard potentially by running these sort of rounds. So from my perspective, I think this format could not be better for you guys in terms of going through this process. So do you agree? Are you kind of looking forward to this process of going through preparing for these teams, seeing what works, reflecting back? Talk me through kind of this format and how it might help a team like you guys.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's the best thing for us, I think, having a round robin, and especially in a best of 3 scenario where you can kind of pre-plan ahead what the maps you think are going to be, or you get an idea as to I think best of one would limit you in some. You don't know what they're going to ban. It could be anything, but in a best of three, you have a bit more of an idea. So, like obviously, the planning for the Vita has already begun. Kind of the preparation's already begun. So we should be in. I think we have about 3 to 4 weeks,
Yeah,
3.5
you've got quite a
weeks,
while, yeah.
until our group starts. So obviously, the preparation is well underway for that, and it's just it will come down to the day. Obviously, good preparation. Hopefully, we'll succeed, cause a few upsets, and get through the group. I don't expect us to win every single game. Obviously, that's pretty tough opponents, but the ultimate goal is obviously get through the groups. We might not be able to do that. We can learn from it.
In terms of the other tournaments you're playing, is the focus of the whole team really on Pro League right now? Is it really like, let's just throw everything at this? The other tournaments realistically are we're just sort of going through the motions. We're just playing these games when we're really focusing. So you were talking about example, you're already kind of prepping for some of these games or thinking about the vetoes. Does that mean you're really focusing totally on Pro League right now?
Yeah, I mean, Ross, our coach, was saying before that it's kind of a good thing that we're playing these other cups in between, because like I think a mistake that a lot of teams make is they're not really match fit for officials.
Yes. Yep.
So that's kind of our philosophy around it. We like last year we progressed really quickly because we were playing a ridiculous amount of officials every week, and we were incredibly match fit. And obviously, I think that sort of aids in the consistency of the team. Like playing these other cups, winning sometimes, losing. It doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for us. It's the goal is obviously Pro League. It's the biggest tournament we're in, and it's just a matter of obviously playing these cups, trying to win them in the meantime, and just trying to keep match fit, I guess.
Yeah, you see this play out a lot, particularly after the player breaks. Every time there's a big event after the player breaks, there's always massive upsets every single time, because clearly a team has just come in with, maybe they've only been scrimming for a few days, whereas some of the other teams might be playing smaller tournaments. I mean, what's a good, like Forza, for example, the amount of games that Forza team plays is insane. The number, like, they must play at least an official a day or something mental. Because I remember looking at the stats of Flashpoint, and they're just like the maps played stats for them, which is absolutely unreal. So I do wonder for a team like them, or some of these potentially a Gambit as well, how much just learning through trial and error, playing so many games, seeing so many different styles. Like, imagine the amount of ideas you're going to get when you're just playing all of these different teams every single day. So yeah, I guess this kind of factors in for you guys as well if you want to be playing a lot of officials yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it works either way. If you lose, you can obviously watch it and see where you've been going wrong. And if you're a team like Gambit who wins everything, you just get unreal amounts of confidence, and you go into every game thinking you've already won it pretty much, and you just feel so confident. Every call you make is 100% confidence, or every peak you make is going to be 100% confidence. So regardless of whether you win or lose, I think there's always like good things to take out of it.
Yeah, and I also wonder for, you can talk to this potentially when you're seeing so many different styles. So a big topic we have and in terms of analyzing top teams versus the lower level teams is how much a shock factor a lower level team can bring by bringing a really out of left field style, or a big topic of guests we have at the moment with Katowice is how much of Spirit versus Pro Gambit doing well is simply a fact of these top European teams are not used to this style of play. They're bringing out weird setups. They're bringing out they're using their nades in a very different way. They're being very proactive, for example. So is this something you found, that just playing so many different styles? I mean, surely you must play so many different styles of teams in some of these, a Snow Sweet Snow, for example, or even a qualifier for a Flashpoint. Is this something you found, that, just seeing so many different ideas, like the amount of ideas that must be feeding into you must be a bit crazy playing some of these tournaments?
No, yeah, I've always had this opinion that outside of tier one, it's just a free for all, because what used to be the case was like tier one teams were getting invited to the same events over and over, so they just play each other in this like small little bubble. But then you'd play like an open qualifier, for example, and you just get exposed to so many different play styles, because you're playing it like in an open qualifier, you're playing 8-9 different teams on one day, and then you have to play best of threes against an unknown team. And that's where like you see so many upsets happen in open qualifiers, because it's just a different play style you're not expecting. I think even some top teams have gone out in open qualifiers. I know we have.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just that's what I mean. It's like a very stylistic way how teams can counter you, and something you don't always expect, and you can get in a best of one or even in a best of three, sometimes you can get completely taken out of guard. Like some maps you think you're really comfortable on, then this other team comes out of nowhere and does something you've never seen before, and you just get absolutely owned. So it's definitely a factor in CS for sure.
Yeah, you certainly see it in a lot of the, particularly the open qualifiers for majors. There's been so many kind of crazy results where just some like random mixed team of just FPL players are taking out real teams because they're just, I don't know exactly what rounds they're running. They're probably just being super individually aggressive and they're just not ready at all to play against it in terms of the pro teams. So for you guys, are you trying to play more kind of ABC CS in terms of are you trying to kind of build up structure and structure and structure? Because you can come from the angle of some teams don't like introducing that much structure because it ties players in too much. It kind of bottles them in, and they only think they can run these sort of set plays. Whereas other teams, they start off as mainly a mix or pugging team, and then they stay in that sort of fashion. They slowly add structure as they go along. So from your perspective, kind of all this topic of seeing all these different styles, is it kind of been like, let's build a solid basis and then we'll build out? Or is it a bit like, let's be a bit looser and add more structure? What kind of angle have you kind of come from in terms of your kind of way of setting up the team?
I think to begin with, when the team was so new last year, I think it was more of a case that it was the mix style that you were saying going into some structure because it was just the only thing that we had the time to do. I think we had like 3 or 6 months to build a playbook, and it was just the quickest thing to do. But now it's more of the opposite, where we're trying to build a foundation on T and CT sides, and it's trying to build protocols that work. Obviously, more than one protocol so that you can sort of adjust it where you need to against different styles, because you can't really, it's hard to just have one thing for a map. Obviously if you play different teams, that's kind of the way that I see it. It's just kind of trying to build a foundation, but also not limiting star players or anyone on the team to play a certain way. They have a lot of freedom to do what they want within the constraints of the systems and protocols and whatever.
In terms of, let's just say T side, for example, would you say for some of your kind of heavy hitter players or some of your star players, you have in some senses built around them, or you've spoke to them and say, you know, how do you want to run these defaults? Or I don't know, maybe you want to run a particular set play and you want them in a certain area coming third in for the trades. Has this been a big factor in terms of thinking about how you set up a team? Is kind of putting the players in the right places or asking them kind of how they want to be playing? How does this all sort of factor together?
Yeah, I mean, there's been many times where I've asked Crucial, the AWPer, like what. 'Cause it's hard. I've always found it difficult for me personally to say to someone how to play.
Yeah.
If they're not comfortable doing something. So, like for example, I don't want to tell someone to go for a pick they're not comfortable going for. So we kind of had this discussion, and obviously the easiest one to say is the AWPer and what he likes to do, picks he doesn't really like to do, or plays that he's really comfortable doing, trying to build that into rounds. Or when we got Flames a few months ago, trying to figure, because he's relatively new to Team CS, just figuring out what he likes doing, little plays he likes doing, or any ideas that he has as well. Like we always have this discussion of like what ideas anyone can bring to the table. Anything they've seen from a demo, or if they're watching a tournament on Twitch or whatever, like just anything they can bring. And we always try and add it to our playbook or add it to a protocol or whatever. So it's not really one person in particular. It's just a collective. We try and do things together.
So in terms of Crucial, from my perspective, a team should basically, at least on the CT side, give their AWPer almost free reign and set up so much around them where, if you limit an AWPer into just playing one spot every round, you're just not getting the most out of them. Whereas if you give them almost free reign and a lot of space to call around themselves, their impact in the game goes up so much where they can have so much more opportunities. So in terms of how you like set up the team, in terms of using Crucial, has this been a big part of how you're trying to set up the team? You're trying to get him moving around a lot, giving him a lot of space, even, I don't know, potentially in game, asking him where do you want to go? Do you want to go for this aggression? You got this spawn, do you want to try this? Is it a big part of how you like to build the team?
I think it depends on the map, really. There's some maps where I think it's plausible and viable to do these sort of things. For example, Mirage, when we first started, we started like a mixed style, and it was essentially like, Joey, where do you want to go? What spawn do you want to take? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And trying to play around him. We still do that to the extent now. It's just we have different things. Whereas a map, I don't know, for example, like Overpass, it's not as you can't really get away with so much as an AWPer because it's just such a annoying map to play as. I think for an AWP because you're always getting flashed, you're getting mollied. Every pick you go for, generally you're facing into the T, sorry, or you're getting blind and you're getting pushed back to the site. So we always try to play to the benefits of other players, but it's it depends on the map really.
I guess Vertigo is a good example on CT side where there's just nothing you can do on an AWP. You're just gonna
like, Joey, do you want a PK ramp? Yeah. I'm blind. Right, cool.
Do you want to hold mid and just fall back when they come for it?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I think the last kind of big-ish topic we should tackle is just kind of the UK scene in general, or kind of your take on it at the moment. So we kind of touched on it earlier, but in terms of when you came into calling, from what I know, it was kind of a decision of there's kind of a lack of leadership figures here. There's a lack of other in-game leaders. Maybe I'm going to have to do this myself and try and step into this role and really kind of take charge because potentially nobody else is. So from your perspective, when you started calling, was this kind of a very conscious decision that we need to have more leaders here, or, there is a void here that maybe I can fill? So how did this all really play out from your perspective?
It was about 2-ish years ago. We just came back from Copenhagen Games and we had roster changes, and it came to I think they wanted to build a UK team. A team Endpoint wanted to build a UK team, sorry. And it was like, well, who can we get? And it was like, okay, we have this massive pool of players, but none of them have experience at a high level. And it's like, well, none of them can IGL. It's like, can we get a European IGL? And at that point, it was like, we're not really known enough to the European level to attract any European IGLs. And it's like, well, sod it, I'll just go IGL then. And it's just from there, really, I've just sort of carried on. It's just before that I was kind of the mid-round caller, where you'd call little things to help the IGL. So I had some sort of understanding of what was going on, but obviously it's been quite a ride in terms of developing my own level of IGLing and trying to call the best I can, really.
And not just in terms of in the server, I guess out of the server, being kind of normally in CS, the in-game leader tag comes with a lot more. It's not just calling in the server, of course, setting up scrims or managing what tournaments you're playing in. I mean, I know you have a manager and a coach now, but presumably at the start it was mainly yourself, and probably had to pick up a lot of these things on the fly of how do you kind of even manage a group of people, or maybe in your case with different nationalities it might even be a bit of a bigger problem of how do you get these cultures to work together and how do you get them all to fit. So has this been a big learning curve for you in terms of out of the server stuff?
Well, fortunately for us, we've all, at least the exception of Flames, we've all been friends for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the culture of the team, it's always been very easy. I've heard of teams where they'll finish scrims, they'll just leave TeamSpeak, but we're happy to sit and chat for hours. It's not like a chore for us. We just get along with each other. We've been friends for years. So that's the one nice thing about this team. It's not really a chore to come on. It's like you actually enjoy coming on. But yeah, when I first took over the reins of IGL, I guess I was literally booking scrims. I was managing the schedule, what time we're playing, getting invites from tournaments, talking to the admins, trying to schedule that in with our schedule, trying to book ESEA games over. It was mental. I was doing 8 different jobs as well as IGLing. So yeah, it's definitely more to it outside the server, and at the same time, it's trying to do theory time with the guys on the server, and also spend more time not playing, thinking about how you're going to call. So there's a lot of different things it comes to when you IGL, and it was more than I expected to be honest. There's a lot of work that you have to put in to IGL to a high level.
Of course, another aspect is balancing it with your own individual game, because you can't always just think about the bigger picture. You've also got to think about how you're going to play off your site partner, or I don't know how you're going to default for this map control. So has it actually been a really hard task to figure out, should I maybe focus on myself for these scrims, or should we bring more team stuff? Has this been a bit of a balancing act?
Yeah, when I first started, there was times where I literally neglected my own play. I was just we have to focus on the team. And then I was like, wait, what am I even doing? I'm watching myself back in a demo. I'm like, what am I actually doing? I'm staring at a wall trying to call from the mini map. It's just sometimes it gets a bit too much, but then you kind of adapt and you realize there's better ways to call and there's more efficient ways to call, or efficient ways to set up the team. which obviously helps a lot. And I think that's something that I've just learned over the past sort of year, 2 years of calling.
So are you leaning in that vein? Are you leaning more these days towards trying to, like, you don't exactly micro players, you just sort of call that's, I don't know, exec in this way onto the bomb site, and then you let them sort out the nades? Have you kind of moved towards this sort of route of trying to actually have less intensive on yourself and kind of put a bit more on the players, but still have the same call in the end?
Yeah, I mean, I try to, but there's obviously some situations where it just comes natural to micromanage a situation or a round. You know, less likely if I'm like still playing the round, but if I'm dead or something, I can see kind of what's going on. I can make a call and micro that way. But I think when I'm alive trying to play around, it's more relying on teammates feeding information rather than me trying to piece it all together. Because like you see it so much where like people are watching like what is this guy doing? He hasn't even reacted. But like in reality, I'm sitting there like trying to think, okay, he said this, we can do this, and then all of a sudden I'm getting flashed and killed. I'm like, okay, well I'm dead. And it's like sometimes you have to just focus on your crosshair and play your own game. But it's definitely a balancing act and something that I struggled with at the start, but it was slowly, I think, getting to a point where we're playing a higher and higher level of CS that it's becoming a bit easier and more efficient to call in this way.
In terms of bringing Ross in as a coach, is that is a big part of what he does, just helping you with making some of these changes? I mean, we've spoken about a lot of topics in terms of how you call and stuff. Is he a big part of helping you improve, or bringing in a new perspective, or helping particular players?
He gives like a perspective on if we have any issue or like we have a discussion of like how we've been playing or a certain map, for example. Like he'll give his perspective. Obviously, he watches us play every day, so he knows sort of what's going on. Whereas I only have one point of view from what I'm seeing. So it's helpful in that regard. But I didn't. I think when we wanted a coach at the start of the team, we didn't want someone who would bring a theory of how to play the game, because we kind of wanted to build that ourselves. We feel like I know there's coaches that will bring like a set structure. They want to play this way. They want to do these things, and they'll bring all that, which is I think it's fine for some teams, but we just didn't want that. But he definitely helps us in the mental aspect. Like he's always given us, you know, the power of hindsight, I guess. But it's always, you know, being realistic and the bigger picture of things. You know, not getting too frustrated, which I think is how we kind of built a big mental resilience over the last year. How we had some crazy comebacks against some like tier 1 teams. And I think that's what kind of helped us a bit. He's always been like realistic, and you know, if we have an issue, we can just solve it quickly and have discussions. Anything to do with the game, we just talk about. Anything strategically we want to do, we talk about it as a team. It's not really one person bringing anything. Other than that, it just helps us remain a team, and like he's always an extra voice to calm everyone down, I guess.
So in terms of the UK scene overall, I feel like we've just talked about it quite a lot, but this whole like aspect of building the right team environment, reflecting on games properly, not overreacting to one loss or going out on Twitter and just saying a load of bollocks. Like you see, there's a lot in the UK scene at some of the lower levels. So, what's your kind of take on maybe potentially some of us don't do enough to educate some of the newer players in terms of how important this sort of stuff is compared to just aiming and shooting and stuff? Like, it is a team game. It's very important to have this right environment. You have to watch all your games back. Like, do you think there's some work to do on the UK side in terms of changing opinion on these sort of things towards the team game, which is how it really is?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a problem in the UK scene. It's just from in my opinion, it's a bit too amateur. Like, there's a disparity between obviously us and other UK teams in the sense that none of them are really paid to play at a professional level. So there's obviously less expectations, I guess. But you'll see like the recent Epic LAN, like teams will go to that or play it, and then they might lose, and then the team's folded. It's like, okay, well, what's the point of that? I think longevity of a UK team is the reason why we got so good, and why previous teams of Endpoint have always been near the top of the UK scene. It's just because the longer you're a team, obviously, the better you're going to get. But I think teams are quickly to implode or to expect too much too soon. Sorry.
Yeah.
And not really be realistic. But it's something that Endpoint are trying to change. They're trying to build an academy team. where we can influence them as the main roster, give them some guidance and whatever. But it's hard. I mean, it's something I wanted to do before, was sort of build content for the UK players, but it's just something that it just takes so much time. And it's like, obviously we're playing all these tournaments, we're playing Pro League, we're playing Prac. It's like, where do I get the time to do this? So
Yeah.
hopefully in the future it's something I can do, but it's just finding the time to do it, and whether people want to watch it or not, I guess.
Yep. Well, yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest issue from the UK scene, like for example, I haven't really like coached much in the UK scene because I did a bit and then I just couldn't handle it. So I just did I coached some Australian teams and some NA teams and then broadcasting now and all that. So I couldn't really hack it. I couldn't take it in terms of like the egos and stuff at lower levels when they've still got so much to learn as players and they think they're incredible. It's just I couldn't really take it. But from my perspective, like the biggest issue we have in the UK is just like a lack of leadership figures, whether that's in-game leaders themselves or more from my perspective, it's like maybe coaches or maybe kind of people that are a bit more like father figures and just sort of controlling the people and, bringing the right mentality. Because something you see, for example, it's a good one. Denmark, the Danish scene, all of the teams, even if they've got a lot of younger players, it tends to be the case. They've either got an in-game leader that's been around for a long time, or the coach is someone that's a bit older, normally late 20s, early 30s. And you see this a lot in all the Danish teams and as well for some of the academy teams. So is this something you've seen playing out as well, where, yeah, we just don't seem to have a lot of potentially older people around that can kind of sort out some of these problems? I mean, as you've spoken to with Ross, do we need more people like Ross in some of these other teams to try and get them thinking the right way, or focusing on the right aspects of the game?
Yeah, I think it's either or. You need either a coach that has some experience to a level, or obviously, like you say, in Denmark and other countries have IGLs that just go down the tier list. You have a healthy ecosystem. You have players that will join maybe a tier 3 Danish team, but they're learning from a pretty decent IGL. Then they move up a tier, and then they're playing with even better IGL. But yeah, there's nothing like that in the UK, because I think it goes back to, I guess, previous iterations of Counter-Strike. People just ended up quitting, and it wasn't really the case for other scenes. Like the French scene, people didn't quit. Danish, German, like even the Polish scene, they got quite a few people that still play that have played the older games. So it's not really the case in the UK. Everyone ended up quitting, so I guess that's why there's no IGLs, I guess. But in terms of coaches, I don't think there's that many coaches either, to be honest. But I'm not really sure how you can fix these things other than trying to like build it together, I guess, as a scene, trying to build content that can help lower tier people, or trying to teach them what to do and stuff like that. But it's always difficult.
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question I get of how you actually approach these things. I'm guessing Endpoint, particularly with the academy team and all that, you're looking at an angle of, okay, let's try and have influence from the pro team on the younger players so they can see how it works or how you behave, or potentially communication and stuff like this. And obviously you're taking that approach as Endpoint. There's a load of other ways people look at it in terms of running the right tournaments, and there's it's kind of an impossible question to answer, and I don't know. It's the sort of thing where, from my perspective, it's just going to take time, and it's going to take potentially more players like yourself playing with a bigger variety of European players to get past the bottleneck of just UK players to try and get into the top level. Of course, you've got players like Mezzy playing on Cloud9 and had a few of those over the ESMU year and all that. So I don't know, from your perspective, is this just the sort of thing we just got to let it play out, and then hopefully we can get the right players through, and then they can, give their experience back down to the lower levels?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably the harder way. I think the easiest way for it to develop is naturally. Like people, I think the best way for people to sort of excel in the UK scene is to get out of the UK scene, if that makes sense, because then they can experience these different IGLs, these different environments. But that in itself is hard, because I think maybe not as much anymore, but there used to be kind of this like bad rep with UK players, but maybe it's still the case, but I don't know. But it's hard to sort of escape the UK scene and get into these. I think the only other team really is Game Legion with Adam and Dobber, I think it is, UK players. But other than that, you don't really see any UK players in European teams. So, I mean, I guess that's probably one of the easiest ways to sort of do it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of on the veterans, so to speak, to teach, I guess, or to at least like make an ecosystem of content or advice or whatever for people to learn from.
Okay, I think I'm through all of my questions. So, is there any other topics you really want to touch on, or should we look towards rounding this one out?
No, there's nothing that comes to my mind. Covered a lot of pretty decent topics, I think.
All things Endpoint. Is there any sponsors you want to shout out or anything like that, or the organisation or anything like that?
We obviously shout out to all the Endpoint fans. We've got dozens of them, I think. Shout out to all the sponsors.
More than that, I think.
Yeah, hopefully. Shout out to all the Team Endpoint sponsors as well. Obviously, it wouldn't be possible without them. Obviously, shout out to Team Endpoint. Yeah, that's all that done.
Yeah, shout out to the Endpoint guys. Go and follow all of them on the Twitters. Go and watch their games at EPL. Spam poggers in Twitch chat or something whilst they're playing. I don't know, whatever you want to do. But I think that wraps it up. That's it from me. That's it from Max. Hope you enjoyed that one, and yeah, stick around for more content in the weeks to come.